Graveyard tour. Who's here for the? Anybody here for the graveyard tour? Anybody here for Harken with Harkness? Next tour will be leaving at 2 o'clock. 15 minutes. Harken with Harkness. Tremendous tour. Best tour in Salem. Graveyard tour. 2 o'clock tour starting soon. Harken with Harkness. Well, hello.
Hello.
You here for my tour?
I am.
You're in for a treat, my young lady. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful tour. We usually have more people for this. I'm not sure where all my tourists are today, but we'll make do.
I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it.
I'm almost glad I have no other customers today. This is going to be a great tour. Shall we head in?
Sure.
Here with me. Our tour begins here, so welcome to Harken with Harkness.
My name is Sarah.
Well, welcome, Sarah. Welcome to my tour. Welcome to Harken with Harkness, the preeminent graveyard tour in Salem, the only tour that will give you the unwashed, unabridged version of what really has happened in Salem over the years. I am Victor Harkness. I am a direct descendant of Josiah Harkness.
Excuse me,
Hello?
can I get in on the tour?
Well, I suppose so. The tour started at 2 o'clock.
Thank you, thank you.
And your name, sir?
I'm Miles.
Well, hello, Miles. This is the lovely Sarah.
Hello, Sarah.
Hello, Miles.
So our tour begins here. Welcome to Harken with Harkness, the preeminent graveyard tour in Salem. The one tour that will give you the unwashed, unabridged version of the events in Salem around the witch trials and beyond. I am Victor Harkness. I am the descendant of Josiah Harkness, who was one of the preeminent witch hunters of his day. So all of my stories and anecdotes and information will come from his journals and from stories handed down from the Harkness clan for centuries.
Wow. Couldn't get more closer to the heart of Salem than that.
This is the heart of Salem. This is the heart of Salem. This right here is the beginning of our tour. Before I begin, I should note that this is my profession. This is what I do for a living. I guess what I'm trying to say is that this tour costs money, folks. That if we could take care of that little unsavory business now, then we could move along with the tour. Yeah?
Just a minute. How much is it?
It was $20.
$20 for this tour? You must be the
Best
best.
tour, and that's a bargain at half the price. So our tour begins here with this church. It is, well, it's a church. Okay, moving right along. So the history books will tell you that the Salem witch trials happened from 1692 to 1694 in Salem, Massachusetts. But the truth of the matter is most of the action actually happened in what is now Danvers and Beverly, Massachusetts. Again, as I told you before, the other tours and the history books, they don't know what I know about the history of Salem. Again, as a descendant of the great Josiah Harkness, I have information that you will not get anywhere else. Many of the accusations about witches in Salem were the result of two different things. One was there was an almost epidemic of children having seizures that could not be explained by epilepsy or any other medical means. So the townspeople tended to blame these afflictions on witchcraft, that the witches were afflicting these children for whatever reason. And a lot of these were motivated by either petty squabbles or political reasons. Sarah Osborne was a victim of such a petty squabble. Her family and the Eldridge family did not get along. The Eldridges were much more powerful in the community. They did not like the fact that Sarah refused to attend church outings and questioned the authority of the pastor of the church, questioned the authority of the parson of the church, and as a result of those differences, she was accused of witchcraft and summarily hanged. Moving right along. This shrine here has an interesting bit of history to it. So as you can see, Francis Harris died at a very young age. He was accused of a witch, but not because of any type of political infighting or family feuding. His was a quite different story. Poor James. He suffered from tremendously bad breath. I'm talking halitosis like you have never experienced in your life. His breath was enough to knock you out. It was actually claimed that his breath smelled like a combination of garlic and male ejaculate, neither of which he admits to having ingested. At any rate, his aunt, Blanche Anderson, became so disgusted with his breath that she tried to find any way to get rid of him, and in a fit of rage accused him of being a witch. The charges stuck, and he was summarily hanged. Moving right along. You all settled in over there, Miles? All right, well, this is a very interesting piece of history here. This is the gravesite of Indian slave Tituba. Tituba was one of the first 3 people accused of witchcraft during the Salem witch trials. She was accused because she used to read stories to the children, and one of the children became afflicted, and the townspeople decided that the stories she was telling were about fortune-telling and witchcraft and demons, and as a result, she was accused of being a witch. It did not help that the father of Abigail Adams, the young girl who supposedly accused her, used to make frequent visits to Tituba's quarters, and Mrs. Adams was beginning to get a little bit suspicious. And as a result, poor Tituba was convicted and was executed as a witch in 1894. So moving right along. So for our next stop on the tour, and I apologize, we usually try to walk down close to the gravestones, but anyway, this is the grave of Osage Hoda. A very interesting fact in the witch trials. One of the things that they used for evidence was something called a witch cake. What they did was, if there was an afflicted child who they thought was afflicted by witchcraft, they made a cake made out of rye and the urine of the child. They would then feed that cake to a dog. And legend had it that as the dog chewed the cake, the witch that had afflicted the child would feel the pain of the dog's bites and would cry out.
Salem, an import-export town, if ever there was one.
He was tried, convicted, and summarily executed. Some might think that's the end of the story, but as legend would have it, it is believed that anytime a dog urinates on this gravesite, Osage Hoda arises from the grave and seeks out young men with needles to seek his revenge. On a more current note, the newspapers and the police will tell you that the epidemic of people dying of heroin overdoses is caused by a very strong strain of heroin that's going around, and any claims that Osage Hoda is responsible for this because of the young men with needles, it's just looked at as the ravings of a crazy old man. Anyway, moving right along.
I'm sorry if I slowed up the tour.
That's quite all right, Miles. That's quite all right.
Thanks for waiting for me.
10 stops,
Appreciate that.
6 stops. I get paid the same either way.
You mean this is the last stop on the tour?
This is the last stop on the tour. Time's up. Time to go home.
It's been 45 minutes.
It's a 45-minute tour. You don't have to stay here. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Is that what the young people say? Well, you can stay here all you want. I have to leave. I have my 3 o'clock tour to meet.
Seems like a lot of money for a short tour. It's supposed to be the best one in Salem. What'd you think of it?
It was
Sarah loved it. Didn't you, Sarah?
absolutely.
Anyway, my dear, shall we continue?
The scent of the Atlantic Ocean breezes leading me home. My search for vengeance never ending. Her city, my habitat, Salem.
So here's our next stop. This is an interesting little story. I told you earlier about how Family Feuds played a big part in the witch trials. This is another example of that. This one hits close to home because this was a feud between the Porters of New Salem and my own Harknesses of Danversport. Fortunately, in this feud, we had the benefit of my great, however many greats you like, grandfather Josias, the preeminent witch hunter, because he was able to deflect most of the accusations made by the Porters while at the same time being able to eliminate some of the more troublesome Porters, like Evan Porter here. Evan Porter was a young man who accused one of my predecessors of stealing chickens from the Porter farm. Of course, the accusations were true, but Josias couldn't have our name besmirched like that, so he, of course, found a way to accuse old Evan of being a witch. The charges stuck. Evan was tried, convicted, and hanged. To commemorate that, for years and years afterwards, we Harknesses, we commemorated the date by, on the date of his death, putting dead chickens on the Harknesses' doorstep. Now, the history will tell you that that feud faded away sometime in the 1800s. But how does that explain the fact that the second Mrs. Harkness left me and married Jerry Porter? The feud lives on. In fact, now every day on that date, I put Market Basket Chicken on their doorstep because you don't fuck with a Harkness. So this is another one that has nothing to do with the witch trials, but it is a very interesting piece of Salem history. This is the grave of Captain Robert Murray, who was a Civil War hero. He was actually the third person to ever win a Medal of Bravery for his brave actions in the locomotive charge of Athens, Georgia, 1863. What makes this thing most interesting, though, is that in 2016, the good folks of Niantic chose to make this gravesite a Pokemon gym. And I caught my first Pikachu here. Moving right along. Oh, I'm sorry, Miles. Any questions? No questions, Miles? Okay. Moving right along. So this is the grave of Ralph Dickey. Ralph Dickey was also executed as a witch. What makes him unique is he is the only one of the convicted witches that instead of being hanged was pressed to death. He was laid out, tied to the ground, and stones were placed on him, and he was left there to die from the pressing of the stones.
That's incredible. I heard his name was Corey Miles in 1692. He was pressed to death. He was the 20th witch persecuted.
You heard wrong, buddy. Ralph Dickey.
How do you think it feels to be pressed to death, Victor?
You know, Sarah, that is an excellent question, a great question. Finally, we have a question worth answering. Having never been pressed to death, I can't really say for sure, but I would imagine that it probably is very similar to the feeling I had in my chest when I realized that Mrs. Harkness number 3 was going to be no more. As the days we were on, and I knew that she was going to leave me, I had that type of feeling in my chest, and I can only imagine that that's what it would be like. What torture that must have been for Ralph Dickey Miles to have been pressed to death. I can't imagine what it would be like to be living and breathing, but not be able to move your lip. Sorry, Miles. Moving right along. So this is the gravesite of Emma Thrasher. Not really anything particularly interesting about her. She was, the reason she's on the tour is because she was actually the woman who accused Ralph Dickey of being a witch, and then later she was accused of being a witch, so there's a little small irony there. Any questions?
Did you have any questions, Sarah?
I didn't, Miles. No, not this time.
Miles, I know you've had a question for like several stops that you've wanted to ask. Go ahead and ask.
Can you explain why so many people were persecuted?
This was actually that's a good question, Miles. Congratulations. This was actually what considered to be one of the first documented examples of mass hysteria. And once the ball got rolling, everybody just sort of jumped on, and everybody's petty jealousies and political and religious differences witchcraft became the way to handle them.
Doesn't it ring so true today?
You're gonna have to go take my next tour if you want my spin on current events there, Miles.
Okay.
Any other questions before we move along?
I can't wait to see the next one.
Okay, let's go.
Sarah, that's your name, right?
Yes.
I just wanted you to know I'm finding this tour to be a little bit disturbing.
A little bit. I don't think it's disturbing at all. It's quite entertaining.
I'm not sure this guy's the real deal.
Did you look it up before you even came?
Well, do you think he has papers to show he's with the Salem Tourism Committee?
Do you think the Salem Tourism Committee even gives people papers?
I think they do, yeah. They're all licensed to do this. They get trained and everything.
They're the ones who are still handing them $20. You're still out of money.
You know, I didn't want to alarm you earlier, but I think I saw him take a drink from a flask.
Whatever gets the work done.
Well, he was getting pretty close to you, so you might want to keep your eyes open.
Make sure to keep a close eye on him, Miles.
Because I said so, Miles. I'm a Harkness, goddammit! Moving right along.
Hey, Victor, so what's the story behind Gates' call?
You know what, Sarah? No story. I'm actually just trying to catch a Lapras here. Moving along. So let me tell you a little bit about this grave here.
Victor, may I ask a question?
Sure, Miles.
Do they have Wi-Fi in the cemetery?
As a matter of fact, yeah, they do. You get your phone out. It's Green Lawn Cemetery, okay?
Okay, Green Lawn Cemetery.
And the password is shut the fuck up. Trying to give a fucking tour here. You interrupt me with questions about Wi-Fi. We're in a cemetery here. Now, number one, what makes you think they would have fucking Wi-Fi? And number two, if they did, what makes you think I would know the fucking password? Sarah, can you believe this fucking guy? Can we move on?
I can't believe this tour.
Seriously, what's the Wi-Fi password?
A clock stopped, not the mantles. Geneva's farthest skill can't put the puppet bowing that just now dangled still. An awe came on the trinket, the figures hunched with pain, then quivered out of decimal into digressless noon.
So here we got G. Albert Voorhees. You might recognize the name as the name of Jason in the Friday the 13th movies. There's no fucking connection, but sometimes tourists like to have their picture taken with it. Be my fucking guest. Miles, you know why polite people don't say the number 288 in public?
Why?
Because it's too gross. Moving right along.
So what do you think it feels like to be hanged?
So this is the grave of William Currier. And no, I don't know where Ives is buried. Anyway, William Currier was known as one of the great necromancers of his time.
A necromancer?
Yes, a necromancer.
What is a necromancer?
Miles, sorry, but it's not what you think it is. I know necro, dead, romance, I know what you're thinking, but no. A necromancer is just simply somebody that thinks he can communicate with the dead.
I didn't think that.
I think maybe you did.
You seem like the type of person that would.
Thank you, Sarah.
I think that.
Thank
That
you,
wasn't what
Sarah.
I was thinking.
Anyway, moving right along. Thank you again for your great question, Miles.
Thank you, Victor.
$20 is not enough for this fucking tour. Do we have fucking Wi-Fi? Fucking tourists. Wi-Fi. Jesus Christ. Wi-Fi in a fucking cemetery. This guy wasn't already in a wheelchair, I'd put him in one. Report me to Salem Tourism. Salem Tourism can bite my fucking ass. I got your Salem Tourism right here. 40 bucks. 40 bucks between the two of them. She's all right. I kinda like Sarah, but fucking Miles. Good thing I got my good friend here. Wonder if maybe I could slip away and catch a few Pokemon while the fucking people aren't looking. I hate fucking tourists.
The seasons change. The leaves change. The structures change. The winter turns to spring and so on. Yet, I exist eternally.
Okay, we ready to get going? So, thus ends our tour today. This is the closing of Harkin with Harkness. My dear Sarah, I sincerely hope you had a good time. Miles, thank you for the $20. If you liked the tour, please tell your friends. If you didn't like it, keep your fucking mouth shut, all right? Moving right along. Nobody fucking looks up any of these stories I've been telling. Yeah, fuck them. Good luck, Eric. Good luck. I'll never see them again. I get you Salem Tourism right here. Salem Tourism can lick my balls is what Salem Tourism can do. Last call for the Harkin for Harkness tour. 3 o'clock tour starts promptly at 3. Last call, anybody for the Harkin for Harkness tour, best tour in the city of Salem. Well, hello, lovely Sarah. Are you back again for another afternoon tour with me?
I am.
I'm thrilled to see you. It looks like it may just be the two of us today. In fact, let's scurry in now before anybody else shows up. So this is the burying point. This is one of the second oldest cemetery in the country and the oldest cemetery in Massachusetts. Some distinguished people buried here are Captain Richard Moore, who was a passenger on the Mayflower, Governor Simon Bradstreet, Reverend John Higginson, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Benjamin Lynn, and probably the most famous person buried here is John Hawthorne, the judge in the Salem witch trials, known as the hanging judge. We'll be talking about him more when we get to his gravestone a little later. They have to have these signs about respect because you won't believe some of the shit the tourists are pulling here. You see this one over here? Haunted house candlelit walking tour. It's a joke. You don't know anything about what really went on around here.
The true Salem.
This is the true Salem. The true Salem you get from a Harkness. Not from some tacky, candlelit walking tour. So you guys picked a great weekend to be here. Early October is good because it's nice fall weather, it's pleasant, you get to see the history. You don't have to deal with the fucking shit show that we get here at Halloween every year. Fucking tourists coming out the ass. If you live in Salem, you can't park anywhere. I call Halloween week Hell Week. Yes, I make my living in tourism, but truly, fuck the tourists. Moving right along. So the official name of this cemetery is the Burying Point, but most Salem officials refer to it as the Gold Mine because it's one of the places that gets the idiot tourists to come in and spend their money here in Salem. I've always found it interesting that Salem has chosen to adopt the darkest moment of their history as a tourist attraction and as even the name of their football team. The football team is the Salem Witches, which I always found bizarre. I mean, Danvers has a mental hospital, but they don't call their football team the Danvers Mental Patients, now do they? As I mentioned, a lot of dignitaries are buried here, and then there's a lot of really kind of meaningless people buried here as well. But you know what? It still brings in the tourists. Of course, my lovely Sarah, you know that when I criticize the tourists, I don't mean you. I'm thrilled to have you here on my tour. In fact, I had a dream last night that we would meet again, and sometimes dreams do come true. Let's move along to the next spot. So this is the Phippen gravesite. They're not particularly famous, but I always found it interesting because of the budgetary concerns of the time. Mr. Phippen over here got this nice, beautiful headstone. By the time his son died 7 years later, the family had fallen into disfortune, and they had to have this hyphenated headstone over here. Poor Samuel the Younger, always got the short straw. Anyway, moving right along. Watch out for the tree, my dear. Lots more graves here. Nothing particularly fancy about any of them, but they're there, so enjoy them. You paid to see them, you might as well take a look. Take any pictures you like. Selfies are fine. And we're gonna head down this way now, Sarah. Sarah, my dear, I am so sorry to keep harping on the dress of these tourists, but look at these idiots over here with their fanny packs and their flip-flops and their cargo shorts. If I had my way, all tourists would be required to dress like you. Not that any other tourist could pull that off, but anyway, right this way. Don't forget to tell your friends about the Harkin with Harkness tour. Look at all these unhappy tourists you see on all these other tours. Follow me up here, lovely Sarah. I'll show you one of the highlights of the tour, one of the more interesting spots on the tour. Right over here. This is the grave of John Hawthorne. He's also related to Hawthorne, who was the hanging judge in the witch trials. They are actually, Nathaniel Hawthorne, the author, is actually a descendant of the Hathorns. He added a W to his name to avoid the shame of what they had done back in the witch trials. Another interesting note is that the prominent hotel in downtown Salem is named after the Hawthorns. It's the Hawthorne Hotel. Yeah, the Hawthorne Hotel. That's also where I married the fourth Mrs. Harkness. And it's also where I caught her banging the best man in the coat room an hour later. The history of the Hawthorns in Salem continues and continues. In fact, the most prominent hotel in the middle of downtown Salem is the Hawthorne Hotel. Yeah, the Hawthorne Hotel, where I married the fourth Mrs. Harkness. Anyway, moving right along.
I know your great-great-grandfather was a judge during the witch trials, but do you have any personal experience in the dark arts? It's unusually hot for October.
Yeah, it's been a very, very warm season, hasn't it?
It has. Really enjoy it right here in the shade.
Oh, that's why I came up this way, my dear. I thought it would be more comfortable. I often like to come up into this area and just enjoy the beautiful scenery and the quiet. This one is particularly interesting. Buried here are Charlotte Bird and her father, Evan Bird. Charlotte was known as Scarlet Charlotte because of her beautiful red hair and alluring figure. She was well known in the town, and because she was just so beautiful. Sarah, Scarlett, she was just so beautiful. Oh, the Birds, yes. So anyway, the father, Evan Bird, he was a drunk and a gambler, and he owed a lot of money to Arthur Stone, who was like the, I guess you call it like the mafia today. He was the head of the seedier side of town, and Evan owed him a lot of money, and he knew that Evan wasn't going to be able to pay. Plus, he had designs on the lovely, beautiful Scarlet. So anyway, she actually succumbed to his offer in the hopes of saving her father. So she gave in to lust. She gave in to a night of passion with Arthur Stone. And then the next day he killed him anyway, and he killed her too. He slit her pretty little throat. And anyway, that's where they get the expression killing two birds with one stone. Okay, moving right along.
So do you have any personal experience with working with the occult or anything? So what do you think it feels like to be hanged? Do you think it's peaceful or do you think it's painful?
So this will be the last stop on our tour. I always save this one for last, for reasons that will become obvious. I told you earlier that that a lot of the accusations of witchcraft came from disputes between two families. But this one is unique in that it arose out of a dispute within one family. My very own Harkness family. This is the grave of Virginia Harkness. She was married to brother Edward, the brother of the famous Josiah Harkness, preeminent witch hunter, who was my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. Well, Virginia was married to his brother Mark, and Mark was a sweet man. He was a kind man. He was a gentle, one might say he was a genteel man, if you understand what I'm saying, and what that must have meant back in the late 17th century. At any rate, he was married to Virginia, and Virginia was concerned because of his complete lack of interest in her physically. He had absolutely no interest in that part of the marital relationship. So she went to Josias for counsel to ask him what she should do. And now, of course, Josias knew of Mark's predilections, but he didn't want the community to know. He wanted to keep it a secret. So to shut Virginia up, he accused her of witchcraft. And the evidence used, this is very, very interesting. The evidence he used was something that they referred to as the witch's teat. And that is a small mole that if a person has it and it's impervious to pain, that means that person is a witch. So as it turns out, Virginia had such a mole on the small of her back. And Josias used that as evidence against her. She was convicted as a witch, and she was one of the 19 women hanged. And I think there's a lesson to be learned from this story. Don't fuck with the Harknesses. It's of particular interest to me, again, because it's my family, and my Uncle Edward seemed to be such a great, kind man.
Victor, I'm here for the tour.
Hello, Miles. Tour's over, Miles.
Really?
Well, we're not taking any new admissions at this point. Sarah and I are having a fine time on this tour on our own. We've made it this far without you. Good
Okay,
day.
Victor.
Tour didn't go as slow this time. Didn't take half a day.
Yeah, no, we had a nice, quiet, peaceful tour together. And it's a day I'll treasure forever, Sarah.
At least one of us will treasure it.
And now I bid you adieu. Farewell. Goodbye. Moving right along. This was such a perfect day until Miles showed up. I was having a nice private day with the lovely Sarah, and then Miles had to come. Oh, what have we here? Something has happened to our friend Miles. Hello there, Miles. How's your day, Miles? This is what it feels like to be pressed, Miles. I am done with this shit.
Harmony Grove, free Wi-Fi. People ask me, Sarah, what's it like being a ghost? And I reply, it hasn't been such a hardship. It's only been 326 years. It dropped so low in my regard. I heard it hit the ground and go to pieces on the stone. At bottom of my mind. Yet blamed the fate that flung it less than I denounced myself for entertaining plated wares upon my silver shelf. Remorse is cruelest, the disease not even God can heal. Its past set down before soul and lighted with a match. Pursual to facilitate and help belief to stretch. A clock stopped, not the mantles, Geneva's furthest skill. An owl came on the trinket, the figures hunched with pain. then quivered out of decimal into digressless news. It will not stir for doctors, this pendulum of snow. The shopman importunes it, while cool, concernless know. Nods from the gilded pointers, nods from seconds slim. Decades of arrogance between the dial, life, and him. Nods from the gilded pointers, nods from seconds slim. Decades of arrogance between the dial, life, and him. The colonial times were not good to me. I was singled out for being different. I was raised by my father, John, and my mother, Elizabeth, always doing what I was told. Salem, a harborside town, holding the darkest of secret. If you see Dorothy or Mercy, tell them I miss them so. Oh, Salem. My death means nothing to me. It is the others who were to follow. Salem, a harborside town, holding the darkest of secret. The sound of the clock bell awoke me. Her toll and her tale were true. Doomed to walk as a ghost since 1692. My name escapes me. Maybe you've heard of me? Let's just say, I lived a good life. Here in the pitch black darkness, I remember the sinew snapped and I fell. I was born in 1653. My name is Sarah Good.